in our community, as in many places across the country, the interests of the people are not paramount. People are looking for money, power, and prestige. And those things are what has corrupted our political system. I'm a person that believes that when you stand in the gap for others, that you have to do so with integrity and a commitment to serve their interests. I'm Pamela Price. I'm a civil rights attorney, and I'm going to be your next district attorney. So this is my beloved Oakland. Being here is like the circle of life. Before I went to law school, before I went to Yale, I was active in the Free Angela Davis movement, and 40 years later, I live in the same neighborhood as Angela Davis. It just feels natural to have been embraced by this community and to be very comfortable here. My parents were African Americans, upwardly bound, middle class Black folks. My mom came from Birmingham, Alabama. The night that Dr. King was assassinated was a signature moment in my life. I was both radicalized and traumatized in the same moment. My 11-year-old mind could not process or understand how someone who stood for peace and love and justice could be killed. I just couldn't understand it, and I couldn't reconcile it, and I couldn't stop crying. I started going to classes about Black history. I organized a sit-in at my high school and was promptly expelled because of it. My mom was terrified. She grew up knowing about Emmett Till, and all she could think was that they were going to kill me. And so she did everything she could to try to keep me out of the movement. But I was in it, and I got arrested in a civil rights demonstration when I was 13. I got tracked into the juvenile justice and the foster care system. It tore up our family. I had a very, very challenging high school career, trying to get to high school when you're in foster care. And at some point I did drop out of high school in my last semester because I was working 2 jobs, and my counselor, I called my school, and my counselor said, "Where have you been? We have been looking for you. You've been accepted to Yale College. We need you to come back to high school and finish high school, and so that we can get you to Yale." For me, going to Yale was a very, very different experience. I came from an all-Black high school. My high school was like 99% Black. And here I was in the Ivy halls of Yale University. But it was a very alienating experience for someone who was a young Black nationalist. I had the biggest Angela Davis afro that anybody had. And it was very alienating. The last thing I had to do before I left Yale was to turn in my paper. And I went to the professor's office, and Professor Duvall offered to give me an A if I would sleep with him. And when I said no, I got my transcript, and there was a big fat C. The Yale Undergraduate Women's Caucus had begun doing a survey of women at Yale, and they had found out that women at Yale were not only being sexually harassed, they were being raped. I joined the case of Alexander versus Yale. The next thing that happened, though, was something that no one could anticipate, which is that all the other plaintiffs were dismissed, and I was the only plaintiff that was allowed to proceed with the case. And it established that sexual harassment in education under Title IX is illegal. I graduated from Yale in May of 1978. I applied to UC Berkeley. I was accepted. There was no one in my family who had ever been a lawyer. And having been through the juvenile court system, my impression of lawyers was not very favorable. The experience that I had at Yale, however, caused me to believe that lawyers could, in fact, be advocates for people. And that was the essence of Alexander versus Yale, was our voices matter. I began working in Oakland on the East Bay for a number of small firms, and I practiced law for roughly 10 years before I decided to start my own firm. I became someone that was willing to do sexual harassment cases and began living my making, that I understood the challenges that people who were subjected to sexual harassment and sexual assault faced. And we represented women, men, young boys, young girls in some pretty harrowing situations, and trying to hold government officials and corporations accountable for allowing that kind of exploitation and victimization to occur. I realized that this was a very rare experience for Black women, that there were not very many of us in this arena, and that there needed to be the voice about the things that matter to us, about education, about gun violence, about the criminal justice system, and those were the things I was talking about. I'm Pamela Price. I'm running for Alameda County District Attorney. When I started running for District Attorney in Alameda County in June of 2017, no one took us seriously. I'm the first person to run for this seat since 1966. And when you don't have a contest, you don't have transparency, you don't have equity. When the seat is just passed down, passed down, passed down as a matter of right and made by appointment, the people have no voice in how justice is administered. And so when we ran in 2018, we were up against an entrenched system with huge financial resources. And I think that in this 2022 election, what we have is an understanding that this is going to be a fight. And unless you are prepared to fight, if you can't stand the heat, you need to get out the kitchen. We've got to really focus on what are we doing in these last days to either raise the money as well as get our canvases out and make sure that we're hitting the streets. We're going to win this race by boots on the ground. How you guys doing? You hanging in here? Good.
Our relatives, our loved ones are on the streets because they get kicked out of, you know, the inadequate system of treatment that we have, and that's where they end up. So this ends up being our, next to jails, this is the default treatment center.
So these folks are out here protesting the lack of investment in resources for seriously mentally ill people and the way that we've mismanaged our health care challenges, mental health, drug addiction, all of that's been completely mismanaged in this county. Clearly, the district attorney has a very large budget, millions of dollars, and budgets are a statement of priorities. And so my priority is to make the community safer, and I understand that to do that, I have to invest in public health. We should not be prosecuting and incarcerating people who are dealing with mental health challenges. We should be investing in alternatives to incarceration. The challenges that we will face are that the criminal justice system is so broken, and so many people are invested in a broken system, that we have people who have participated, prospered, and profited from a broken system. And so we have to resist that and reverse it and work with people to help them overcome it. Doing?
Great to see
you. You too.
We have noticed, especially in the last year, a lot more, homeless people. And I think it's just because, there's less jobs and more people on the streets.
Public safety requires public trust. And the only way that we're going to advance public safety and increase it throughout our county is by increasing the trust that people have in the criminal justice system, in the police, in my office as district attorney and in the judicial branch of our criminal justice system and how justice is administered. And that's the opposite of what we have now. And too often police officers have abused their power, have used their power in illegal ways, and have gotten away with it. And because of that, our community has little, if any, trust in the police. The California Department of Corrections says that 61% of all people whom we incarcerate as district attorneys will reoffend within 3 years and be back in state prison. That is an unacceptable ratio of failure. That means we're failing 61% of the time and succeeding less than 40% of the time. And part of the reason that we're failing is that we need to have effective reentry programs and support for people returning from prison. The status quo is not working. It's time to fight for reform. I want people to understand that you can make a difference, that you have a voice, that you need to raise your voice, because the moral courage that you will display will encourage somebody else. Just like the people who were devastated with the death of Dr. King, they had no idea that they were going to inspire me and millions of other young people who were going to join the front lines, who were going to dedicate their lives to making this country a better place and the world a better place.